Thank you. Giving honor to God, to our pastor, Reverend McCustine, and to all of the ministers, to my friend and brother, founder and head of Impact, Pastor Mount Pisgah in Harlem, New York, Reverend Johnny Green. Give him a hand. To our National Action Network Northeast Regional Director, Reverend Steffi Bartley. And to our national board member, as well as one of the preeminent ministers of this state, Reverend David Jefferson. And certainly to all that have gathered tonight, certainly my friend and sister who has worked so hard on many things in this state, my friend, Sister Tammy Murphy, stand up again. First Lady. And my brother, who has been such a real worker, turning around a lot of lives, Brother Jim McGreevy, who I'm on his board of reentry. I took a minute to come out because I was filling out a complaint with the New Jersey state troopers about a guy breaking the law, preaching without a license, Reverend Raz Baraka. You know, it's against the law to preach without a license. I don't know if Readout ordained you or not. But he is, I've watched him grow into being one of the great mayors, and God has much in store for him. And certainly glad to see a lot of my activist friends down through the years. We marched and went to jail together. Brother Steve Young, I see sitting in the house. And so many more that if I missed your name, it's been a long day, but a great day. When Reverend Bartley asked would I come tonight, I know we do our annual dinner, our annual breakfast in Washington. We did this morning with Martin Luther King III and his family and the governor of Maryland and others, and then our House of Justice all day. But I wanted to come because Jersey City was what Dr. King was about. And it was Dr. King that made those that were neglected and ignored, made them known up front. And when you get so big, you forget what you got big for. We have put too many people in high positions that they forget why we put them there. And they start thinking they got there because of their ability rather than because we put them there. When no one would march or stand up for us in New Jersey, Larry Ham would stand up with us. Stand up, Larry. I took my glasses off and let him know I can still see that far. He didn't think I could see it. As one of the things that bothers me, Sister Murphy, is that America has a strange way of kidnapping holidays. I never figured out how Santa Claus got in the middle of the baby in a manger. How we went from Bethlehem to the North Pole. I never figured out how Easter Bunny got in the way of the resurrection. We reduce what is of substance to something that is frivolous and meaningless. So we don't talk about God interrupting the world and splitting history in half from BC to AD. We talk about what you're going to get for Christmas. We don't talk about the miracle of the resurrection. We talk about an Easter bunny and Easter outfits. And if we're not careful, they will take Dr. King and reduce this to some poet sitting on a mountain dreaming, rather than a freedom fighter that literally changed the culture and laws of this country. They didn't kill Dr. King because he was a great preacher, though he was a great preacher. They killed him because he took the whole veil of white supremacy off and taught us that we deserved what everybody else in this country deserved. And he changed the laws that were on the books. Don't ever forget, it was the law that said we were slaves. It was the law that said we could not sit and use things that others used. It was the law. When they had the founding of this country, before they ever went to Philadelphia in 1776, we were already enslaved since 1619. We'd already been enslaved before they incorporated the United States. They brought us here to be servants and not be paid. That's why 20 years ago when I ran for president in 2004, and they asked me what did I know about foreign policy, I told them we got here on a foreign policy. And we were able to turn this country around because some blacks and whites stood up for what was right. And they distort that story, Castine. They talk about the Civil War. I'm looking at these Republicans, they voting tonight in Iowa in 40 below zero weather. And it's interesting that they say Trump's going to win by a huge margin. And I find that very interesting to me, McGreevy, because, you know, I grew up in Brownsville, Brooklyn. And Brownsville was a rough neighborhood. And I was a boy preacher. And I'd be walking to the train at Saratoga and Livonia. A couple of the guys would always stop me. Remal, I'll need you to go with me to court this weekend. I caught a case. They want me to go and tell the judge something. But I never walked to the subway and one of them said, Remal, I caught 4 cases. Y'all talking about a man being president that's got 4 cases, 91 felonies, and they acting like he ought to be the president of the United States. He ought to be in New Jersey in the reentry program. But when you are in a confused state, you make good look bad and bad look good. And you reverse and normalize what ought to be something that we get away from. And if there's any way to deal with honoring Dr. King, is to turn the truth back to where it ought to be. First of all, don't forget we had to fight to get the holiday. They never intended to have a Martin Luther King Day. People had to march and petition. Stevie Wonder had to write a song. Y'all be playing Happy Birthday at your birthday. That was written for Dr. King. And because the ground rose up, a president that did not like Dr. King, named Ronald Reagan, called Dr. King a communist. He ended up having to sign the bill to make it a Dr. King federal holiday. But I want you to understand tonight that everything that Dr. King fought for is at risk. Reverend Malcolm Byrd, who's with me, heads our operations for NAN. We talk about it often. In the last year, the Supreme Court has killed affirmative action, has taken out Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, has stopped all of our women's right to choose in the last year. And how did they do it? Because Donald Trump stacked the Supreme Court with 3 conservative right-wing judges. How did he do it? He won an election and in 4 years turned this country upside down. And you got Negroes running around Jersey City talking about, I don't know what to vote for. Everybody that didn't vote put those judges on the Supreme Court. Everybody that didn't vote took away women's right to choose. Everyone that didn't vote took affirmative action from our children. You running around like you were too busy to vote doing nothing. And you have stripped this nation of what Dr. King fought for. And you think Dr. King's holiday is a day to go to the mall rather than to go and organize like Dr. King did. If Martin Luther King and those with him had not stood up, you would not have the job you have. You wouldn't live where you live. Didn't nobody wake up one day and say, let's be nice to Negroes? We had to fight. We had to go to jail. Some went to their grave to sponsor you where you are. And you've gotten so weak and ungrateful that you won't continue a struggle that made you possible in the first place. Going down, getting up in these office buildings like they wanted you up there. Now that's why we're marching right now on Bill Ackman, guy that helped push out the first black president of Harvard. And then he turned around and said, now I'm going to get rid of DEI, which is diversity, inclusion. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. What DEI is what helped put blacks in the corporate suite. DEI is what gave us a shot when we didn't have a shot. And maybe sometime God lets the devil come do something to break you back into realizing who you are. Read the book, in the book of Exodus. After God had sent Moses, and we rush through that story too much, nobody ever stops and asks the question. This goes to the reentry program. Why did God choose Moses? Well, first of all, Moses was raised in Pharaoh's house. Thought he was an Egyptian. When he found out who he was, that the maid raising him was his mother, the anger got in him so till he murdered somebody. Is that in the book? Read out. And he ended up leaving Egypt, running and hiding so he wouldn't be captured as a murderer. Why would God take a murderer, fugitive, and use him to liberate people? All you bourgeoisie that think you got to be up here. God likes to take rejects. God took a fugitive for murder and met him at a burning bush and told him that I want you to turn around and go back to Egypt. And I want you to go to Pharaoh. You know the address because I arranged for you to grow up in his house. And tell Pharaoh to let my people go. And Moses, like many of us, start making excuses. We are bold and we are proud until God gives us something that we don't know how we're going to do it. He started making excuses. He said, I can't go, I can't speak, I got a heavy tongue, I stutter. God said, I knew you couldn't talk when you came up here. Just open up your mouth and I'll speak for you. Somebody sitting in here tonight don't think you qualified. You don't need qualifications. If God call you, God can use you. If God call you, he can lift you up. And whatever you don't have, God will provide. Well, you don't know my background. I know Moses' background. Everybody in the Bible God used had a bad background. Because if God used people that had all the credentials, we would think it was them and their credentials. But if God takes some reject, somebody nobody thought could do nothing, somebody people thought could never be anything, and if God picks them up, you would say only God could have done that. You can tell Bartlett been in trouble. He still got his hands up. You know, that's why, Pastor, I don't like to mess around with folk that ain't got some mess in their background. Reverend Bird be coming in. Reverend, we got somebody, here's his resume, clean resume. Been to right schools, right fraternities. Got great references. Nobody got nothing bad to say about him. I said, well, I don't want to mess with that. I fly a lot. I did 3 cities this week, 2 today. And brothers that travel with me tell you, don't bother me no matter what the weather is. If I got to go, we go. Early in the morning, late at night, let's go to the next engagement. But the only time I won't get on a plane, Jefferson, is if they tell me it's the pilot's first trip. And they be standing there explaining, we checked it, he got his license, he passed all the tests. I said, I understand that. But I don't want to get up there and the first time he hit turbulence. And he ain't never navigated that. I don't want to be up there with him first time he got to figure that out. Or first time the plane drops and he never was in charge of that. I don't want to be up there first time he figured that out. What I'm saying, Mayor Baraka, is I like to get folk with resumes that ain't got all that. Because if you roll with me, we liable to go through something. And if you ain't never been through nothing, I don't know if you can get through nothing. I like to hang out with folk that been knocked down, talked about, smeared, dirtied up, and somehow God picked them up and cleaned them off. Because then they know only God could have done that. If you ain't never been through nothing, you in church tonight guessing what God can do. But if you've been through the fire, if you've been through the flood, if you made it when nobody was on your side, you know what God can do because he done it for you. We're in the midst of a precarious time. From 1619 to the early 1800s, we were slaves, chattel. The largest ports they would sell us was in Charleston, South Carolina, and in Lower Manhattan. Reason they call Wall Street is that's where they docked us. That's why the African burial ground is there now. They sold us like a bar soap. Would look at us and see if we were built with a certain physique. Look at our teeth to see if our health was right. And sold us like we was a product. Took our names. Took our families. Sold our mothers to one state and fathers to another. And tore us apart. And for 246 years, we were in chattel slavery. And finally, as white abolitionists and others began raising this issue, the South rose up and said, we're going to own our slaves. And there became this battle between the northern slaves and the southern slave states and the northern slaves. And as this battle went, that's why it was so insulting to me. Nikki Haley talking about Civil War was about good government. And then Donald Trump talking about they could have negotiated slavery. How do you negotiate people that God made that you should have never put in that predicament in the first place? And as the war went on, what they won't tell folk is that the North started losing major battles. And the Confederates got as far north as Virginia. Frederick Douglass and others were saying, you need to let the slaves go and let them join the Union Army. And when they kept getting further north, Lincoln finally said, okay, let the blacks in. And they made them members of the Union Army. And when we joined the Army, we backed up Robert E. Lee. And they beat the Confederates and won the Civil War. That's why it is wrong when we teach young folk that Lincoln freed the slaves. The slaves freed Lincoln. And that's why Lincoln sat down and signed the Emancipation Proclamation. What did it say? It said January 1st, 1863. At midnight, we'd be free. A lot of y'all don't understand. Watch night was not about jumping and shouting. Watch night was to see if when the clock struck 12, whether we could walk off the plantation. That's why watch night in the black church is different than any church in the world, because it's the night we walked off for the first time to become free. And for 12 years, we went through what was called Reconstruction. But to every action, there's a reaction. And they backed up and took back all that we got. We had over 23 members of the Senate and the House that were black. By the time they got to the turn of the century, after the Tilden-Hayes Compromise and Plessy versus Ferguson, we lost all the members of the House. They raised up the Ku Klux Klan and White Citizens Council and killed 5,000 of us, lynched us legally. And from 1896, with Plessy versus Ferguson, we had no legal rights until 1954, with Brown versus the Board of Education. It was against the law for us to be treated as equal citizens. In 1954, we had Brown versus the board, where it was the first time they said you could not educate us and call it equal. And the next year, in 1955, they killed a black boy in Mississippi called Emmett Till. A few months after that, a woman got on a bus in Montgomery, Alabama, and sat down in the front of the bus. They told her it's against the law, move your seat. She wouldn't move. What we don't talk about is there were 3 blacks in the back of the bus saying, what is she doing causing trouble? She should get on back here with us. Don't nobody know their names because they didn't do nothing, but this little frail black woman refused to give up her seat. They didn't say she broke a custom. They arrested her because it was the law. And they called a meeting in the churches, a meeting like this, packed churches. And a young black pastor hadn't got to town long, had been educated from Morehouse to Boston University, stopped by Crozer Theological Seminary. He had just got to town. They elected him the head of that organization because he was new. They didn't elect him because they knew he was going to be what he became. They figured that he was new in town and nobody was against him. Because you know how some of you preachers can get your ego get in the way. Y'all be fighting on who's going to be the big preacher. I can say this because I'm going back across the Hudson. Jefferson and Bartley and them got to live out here with y'all, so I can tell you. And Martin Luther King started leading a boycott. And the theme of the boycott was, it's better we walk in dignity than ride in shame. And for one solid year, they walked to work. They walked to church. They carpooled even if they didn't know each other. And they broke the back of the Montgomery Bus Company. They never did like Negroes, but they couldn't stay in business unless they had to deal with our humanity. I once asked Rosa Parks, we was in a room, about 10 of us. I was blessed to even one day pass that, speak at her funeral. And I said to her, what made you have the nerve to sit in the front of that bus? And she looked at all of us and said, you know, I thought about going to the back. But I thought about Emmett Till. And something made me just sit there. And something gave me the strength. I didn't know we were going to have a boycott. Movements are not started by you all that study all this stuff in these academies. Movements start when people just decide that I'm going to put it all on the line. And that's when God steps in. Because God will give you the strength you didn't even know you had. We are at the same time where they're stripping everything from us. They're taking back everything. As I said, they're taking back voting in some states, making it hard to vote. They're taking back women's rights. They're taking about our affirmative action. They're taking back DEI. And if there is any way to celebrate Dr. King, it's for us to get some Rosa Parks that'll decide in these times. I don't know what it's going to take, but I'm not going to take my place in the back of the bus. Now, I'm telling you, now there going to be some Negroes that'll tell you, leave it alone. Just go along to get along. Ain't nothing you could do, but some of us know that God did not make us to be subordinate to nobody. God didn't make us to back down to nothing and nobody. Anybody that lives beneath their privilege is an insult to God. If you look at the course of the universe, I was flying in today, and we sitting up front. You know, Reverend, I fly first class in honor of Rosa Parks. I don't get in the back of nothing. And you look as you come down how the roads are all put perfectly and how things just operate in nature perfectly. You notice, read out, you never seen the sun bump into the moon. You never see planets collide. God made the universe in perfect order. So why do you think God got to you and made his first mistake? You are not a mistake. Everything you've been through was to prepare you for who you can be. Every night you cried was to get you tough enough to stand up and be what you could be. Don't let nobody tell you where you can't go. God wouldn't give you a thought if he couldn't make it a reality. That's why Dr. King said he had a dream. Because a dream is something that is not real, but it's something you can conceive. And God takes dreamers to change reality. And in these times, at this place, in 24, it's time for us to start dreaming again. It's time for us to see a new America and a new New Jersey. We do not have to accept where it is. You sitting up with no money, watching billions on TV. You've lost your pride. James Brown, the Godfather Soul, was like a father to me. Took me in, I was a teenager. His son worked in my youth group and got killed. He kind of took me in. And the last conversation we had, I ended up preaching his funeral. About 2 weeks before he died, Larry, he called me on the phone. He said, Reverend, let me ask you something. I said, yes, Mr. Brown. He said, when you were growing up, I was singing, Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud. Aretha was singing Respect. Marvin Gaye wrote a song about the Vietnam War, What's Going On. He said, I was riding in my car the other day and turned on the radio, and every song was calling us a nigger, a hoe, and a bee. He said, where did y'all lose your pride? How you going to raise children that think they ain't nothing but a nigger? and expect them to be something. I remember, Roz remembers this, a few years ago, some of us came out against the N-word. Some of the rappers got mad and called a meeting. And they called me in, going to chastise me, about 10 of them. Big name rappers. Said, Reverend Al, we respect what you do in the community, but we got freedom of speech. I said, you do? They said, yeah. I said, then why, if you go in the studio and use a derogatory name about anybody but us, they won't put the record out? They made Michael Jackson go in the studio and take a line out that was offensive, and they right. I said, so what are you saying? If you call the Irish a name, it's bias, hate speech. Call Italians a name, hate speech. Call Jews a name, hate speech. Call blacks niggers, free speech. We're building a culture of telling our children they're nothing. That's what we need to deal with on King Day. We need to correct who we are and correct why we are who we are. And then Dr. King never stopped dreaming. That's why I heard Ras Barack was right. Dr. King fought all the way to the day he died. He was in Memphis fighting for garbage workers. He never stopped dreaming. And there's a part in the Bible about a dreamer called Joseph. Let me tell you about what they do to dreamers, and I'll let you go. The ones that turned on Joseph was not the enemy. It was his own brothers. Bible, Genesis 37, talks about how he dreamed a dream. And he told his father the dream. And because his father had him in his old age, Joseph was his favorite son. And his father gave him a coat of many colors. Jesse would have called it the rainbow coat. And his brothers saw him not long after, saw him coming afar off, and say, here comes the dreamer. And he's got that coat. Let us slay him. Dip his coat in some blood. And tell the father that some wild beast got him. And let's see then what happens to his dream. One brother felt a little bit of mercy and said, well, let's not kill him. Let's just throw him in the pit. And they conspired and got him and threw him in an empty pit. Some of y'all been thrown in pits. But I come to tell you tonight that when they threw him in the pit, they were throwing him in the hands of God. Because there is no pit that they can put you in that God can't lift you out. God lifts people out of pits. Don't worry where you are. Let God lift you from your pit and dream on anyhow. I tell you I'll let you go, but I'm going to tell you this. I'm not talking what I studied. I'm talking about what I know. When I was born in Brooklyn, my father was a businessman, had a little corner store and owned some houses. Moved us out to Hollis, Queens, had a nice corner house. One day Daddy walked out, Mama couldn't keep things going. They couldn't pay the bills. Come one day and cut the lights off. She couldn't pay Con Edison, cut the gas off. It was cold in the wintertime. But she told me, don't worry about it. She made me do my homework by candlelight. Mama had to drop out of school in Alabama. I was born in New York. She was from the South. She made me do lessons she didn't even know the answer to, because she told me I was going to be somebody. We ended up moving to Brooklyn, grew up in the projects. And I used to walk her to the trains in the morning. She had a cleaning rag and a pocketbook because she would go downtown to do domestic work to subsidize the welfare checks she was taking care of my sister and I. And on the way to the train every morning, she would say, don't worry about it. God will make a way somehow. And it used to annoy me, but as I got older, I never forgot them walks to the train that God would make a way somehow. And I ended up going to Brooklyn College. I was the first one in my family to ever go to a college campus. And I told Reverend Jefferson this story before. I got out there like some of y'all, hanging out with friends that had grown up a little better than me. Some of them of different races. And they all knew I was a preacher. By then I was in civil rights youth group. And I was trying to be sophisticated like them. And they kept teasing me saying, we won't go to church with you one Sunday. And I didn't want to take them to our church because I know they wouldn't understand how we had church. And they finally cornered me off and said, we're going to church with you Sunday. And I went to the payphone. Wasn't no cell phones then. And I called home. I said, Mama. She said, yes. I said, I want you to know some friends of mine coming to church Sunday. She said, oh, that's nice. I said, and I'd appreciate. I was trying to ease into it. I said, I'd appreciate if you'd be cool this Sunday. She said, what you mean, boy? I said, well, you know how you can get excited in church. Because Mama had a thing that when the church got good, she would get up out of her seat and kind of jump up in the air and then come down on her feet, leaning to the side. Looked like she gonna fall over. But she wouldn't fall over and she couldn't stand up. She'd just jump up and down. She said, oh, boy, go on about your business. She hung up the phone, and sure enough, that Sunday, I went to the church, and 4 or 5 of my friends sitting down the aisle with me, and Mama was cross on the other side. She had on her best Sunday go-to-meeting hat, had a little scarf over her knees, and she was sitting there trying to act all sophisticated, like the mother of a college student. But halfway through the service, I wasn't going to tell this tonight, but when you got to singing, I thought about it. Halfway through the service, the choir started singing one of them old gospel songs. And the more they sang, Mama started rocking back and forward. And when they hit a high note, Mama forgot all about my college friends. She jumped up out of her seat, leaned to the side, and started jumping up and down. All of my friends started pointing and laughing. For about 2 or 3 weeks, they kept mocking my mama all over Brooklyn College campus. But as the years went by, about 1991, I was leading a march in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. They had killed a 16-year-old black boy named Yusuf Hawkins. A young white man ran out the crowd and stuck a knife in my chest. They rushed me to Coney Island Hospital. They rushed me in the emergency room. They didn't know how deep the knife went. They laid me out. They knocked me out. I couldn't wake up. Early the next morning, I'm laying up there with intravenous in my arm, with oxygen mask over my mouth and over my nose. The doctor came in, and I looked up at the doctor. I said, Doctor, I want you to tell me the truth. How bad is the wound? Has any artery been hit? is any kind of permanent damage. And the doctor looked down at me and said, Reverend, I don't understand it. When we brought you in and we did the x-rays, all the blood was everywhere. But we took an x-ray early this morning and everything kind of cleared up. And I don't know what to tell you, but my diagnosis is that everything gonna be all right. Everything gonna be all right. As the doctor started telling me his diagnosis, I started moving toward the edge of the bed. He looked and said, Nurse, make him lay down. If he need to use the restroom, bring him a bedpan. She came to make me lay back down. But before she could get to me, my right leg slipped off the bed. She got a little closer, and my left leg slipped off the bed. I eased off the side of the bed. When I got on both my feet, I leaned to the crowd and started jumping up and down. I know now why Mama was shouting. He walks with me. He talks with me. He tells me that on his own he been food when I was hungry. He been watered when I was thirsty. He's my rock, my sword and shield, my will, my will, my will. In the middle of the wheel, he's the lily of the valley, the bright and morning star. He woke me up this morning, started me on my way. Yes, 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 yes. You know, when I came in, I heard the choir sing. Jeff, I wish I could sing like that, but God didn't give me that gift. Then I heard the lead singer come out the audience, and she went up 2 or 3 octaves and had us all clapping and shouting. I wish I could sing like that, but God didn't give me that gift. But sometimes in the midnight hours, after my cell phone stops ringing, after the doorbell quiets down, I go out in my living room all by myself and I sing my song. I can't sing for Sunday morning service. I can't sing with the Jersey City Choir, but I sing because I'm happy. I sing because I'm free. His eyes is on the sparrow. I know he watches me. Yes, yes, yes.